Now, the findings and recommendations that I'm going to be talking about are high level. These are summary level statistics that we generated so we could understand community and demographic level responses to the survey questions. Community level responses indicate sentiment and perceptions of the general population, whereas splitting the survey data by demographic groups enables us to determine if there might be inequities, if there might be differences in experience, in perception, as it relates to living in the greater Mankato area. So what I will do today is discuss some of the strengths, some of the positive things that we saw coming out of this study. We'll talk about some areas for improvement, as there always are some. We'll also go through some of those variances that I mentioned. So if there are certain demographic groups that did not necessarily align in their perception of some of our primary research categories with the general population, that's a really important item to note and to be aware of and to have that context as we move forward as a community. Finally, I'll also share some recommendations. We had the benefit of, through this process, meeting with individuals who are community leaders, collecting information through the survey, and also using open-ended survey responses to further gather information that allows us to form these recommendations. So those are the items that we'll go through today. I hope that in hearing this information, in learning some of what we've gathered as a result of this study, that you will be curious. That you will be curious and seek out the full study and spend some time reading it, flipping through and looking for more information about what is relevant to you, relevant to your community, and relevant to your organization. The study is segmented in a way to make it very easy for an individual who's interested in these broad topics to go through and see our findings at the community level. However, if you focus on a particular area, let's say you're really interested in healthcare or transportation or inclusivity, you can also use the report to hone in on that data, both the main body of the report and the appendix, which contains a plethora of tables and charts in addition to the main findings. So let's get started. First, let's talk about some strengths. We found from survey respondents that 81% feel their community offers quality higher education and post-secondary options. 76% feel it is safe to live in the greater Mankato area. 67% indicated that their community offers quality K-12 education to all residents. 64% feel this community offers quality healthcare options for all. And 62% feel it is easy to find a job in the community. Mankato area residents feel very optimistic about the safety of their community. So that's 76% that I mentioned. And in general, feel safer than the state average. There are some exceptions here, which we'll chat about a little bit later. I would also note that Mankato area residents feel very optimistic about access to quality education. So that 81% who agreed their community offers quality higher education, as well as the 67% who indicated the community offers quality K-12 education. Now, that satisfaction is significantly different from the national average. If we look at data nationwide, we find that only 45% are satisfied with K-12 education. And greater Mankato area residents also score higher education offerings more favorably than the national average. So in this way, we see that while these numbers are not only positive, they also indicate that there is greater support and positive sentiment about these particular statements in the greater Mankato area. In addition to the 5 overall strengths that I shared with you, I wanted to go through each of the major research categories and share a strength. Some of these align with the overall data that we just discussed, but there might also be some differences here that you'd be interested in. So, our research categories are education, safety, healthcare, economics, inclusivity, transportation, and housing. And let's take a look at each of those top strengths. Under education, folks feel their community offers quality higher education and post-secondary options. 81% agreed or strongly agreed with that statement. When it comes to safety, 76% felt it's safe to live in the greater Mankato area. As it pertains to healthcare, 64% noted that the community offers quality healthcare options for all. These statistics should be familiar from the prior slide. When it comes to economics, 62% feel it's easy to find a job in this community. 57% feel their community values diversity. 47% think that it is easy to get to any one place one would like to visit in the community. And finally, only 31% noted that community members have equal access to mortgage, insurance, and loan services. So while this is a major strength within this category, it's important to note that there's a lot of opportunity for improvement, that last housing statistic. We just talked about some of the positives coming out of the study, and there certainly are more than the 5 that I shared. Now we're going to talk about some opportunities for improvement. As we know, there's always opportunities to make changes to ensure that members of our community feel more safe, included, and generally have a positive perception of our community. So, that said, let's review some items that didn't score quite as well in the survey. As you can see here, 27% of respondents felt the community offered enough quality and affordable housing. 27% also noted that real estate agents treat all community members equally. 28% feel that housing services and assistance are easy to find. 31% feel that community members have equal access to mortgage, insurance, and loan services. And 31% feel bias, discrimination, or exclusion are rare within the community. Now, I think you'll see that there's a theme here in some of these lower scoring areas, and that is the research category of housing. Housing sentiments scored lowest for most greater Mankato area residents, an average score of 28.5% having positive sentiments across 4 housing-related statements. However, greater Mankato area residents are still slightly less concerned about housing than the national average. So it's important to be aware of that context. Across most diversity dimensions, housing questions scored the lowest sentiment responses as well, including access to mortgages, housing assistance, and real estate treatment of community members. When asked about their top concerns for the community, most respondents again identified housing as a significant concern. So this significant concern aligns with national surveys, which indicate that about half of Americans, around 49%, say the availability of affordable housing in their local community is a major problem. And this is up 10 percentage points from early 2018. So between 2018 and 2021, when the Pew Research Center conducted their last survey, we've seen nearly a 10 percentage point increase in housing-related concerns. Let's take a look at some of the opportunities for improvement by major research category. As was mentioned earlier, the major research categories are education, safety, healthcare, economics, inclusivity, transportation, and housing. We see from the study that 44% agreed that schools meet the needs of all students regardless of their backgrounds. 42% believe that people from diverse communities and identities feel safe in the community. 36% noted that information and resources on substance abuse assistance are easy to find. 34% noted that wages and salaries in the area meet the cost of living. 31% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed that bias, discrimination, or exclusion were rare in the community. 33% felt transportation assistance is easy to find, and 27% feel the community offers enough quality and affordable housing. This may lead you to ask, well, what are the top concerns for each demographic group? It's a great question. So let's take a look. American Indian and Alaska Native identifying individuals cited condition of property as a top concern. For American Indian and Alaska Native identifying respondents, that concern was about 30% as their top concern. And that was very significant as it related to the number of respondents and their selections in the survey. It's important to note that, yet again, Greater Mankato area respondents were slightly less concerned than national average indicates in other studies, but it's still a primary issue for this demographic group. So what are we talking about here? Well, the national data shows us that about 22% of our country's 5.2 million Native American inhabitants live on tribal lands. Living conditions on reservations have been cited as comparable to third world in some studies, such as one from Gallup Independent. 40% of on-reservation housing is considered substandard, compared to 6% outside of reservation housing. And nearly 1/3 of homes on reservations are considered overcrowded. Less than half of the homes on reservations are connected to public sewer systems, and 16% lack indoor plumbing. In some areas, up to 50% of Native American identifying individuals' homes are without telephone service, and 23% pay 30% or more of household income for housing. So it's very understandable that this particular demographic would have a lot of housing concerns, and specifically property condition concerns. So again, our data here is consistent with national data, but this is a primary concern for this demographic group. Next, we'll note that Black or African American identifying respondents were most concerned about safety, bias, and discrimination in their communities. Now, earlier we noted that Mankato area residents feel quite optimistic about safety in their community, with 76% of respondents agreeing or strongly agreeing that it's safe to live in the greater Mankato area, that they feel safer than the state average. However, state studies show us that just over half of BIPOC Minnesotans, 54%, feel safe walking alone in their neighborhood at night. And that's in comparison to 84% of white Minnesotans feeling safe walking alone in their neighborhood at night. 87% of all men in Minnesota reported feeling safe just about always or most of the time, compared to 74% of all women. And significantly fewer immigrants, 50%, who live in Minnesota reported regularly feeling safe walking alone in their neighborhood at night than respondents who were born in Minnesota, about 82%, or who were born in another state and then relocated to Minnesota. So it's again important to note that these concerns are specific to demographic groups, and that there may be necessary interventions, community programs, or other things that community organizations can do in order to help address this concern. Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander identifying respondents also flagged safety concerns, but their safety concerns were primarily about students at school and in university settings. And Asian identifying respondents noted that public transportation routes and hours of operations were a concern. Transportation plays a huge role in revitalizing, reshaping, and defining communities, especially when it comes to public transportation. Transportation is all about improving mobility, connecting people and places to each other, and making communities accessible. The way in which transportation systems are created, supported, and operated frequently helps businesses succeed and organizations and neighborhoods thrive. And that's why transportation has been cited as being very critical to the AAPI community. It provides access to jobs, education, community, and services. And it's important to note that members of this community have also experienced anti-Asian hate in transit, and therefore routes and hours of operation may be of particular concern to them. Being able to access those services, education, and jobs that I just mentioned, and to do so safely. Multi-race, Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, Latin, individuals with a disability, LGBTQ+, and veteran identifying individuals all cited a lack of affordable housing options as a primary concern for their demographic group. Housing, as was mentioned earlier, is a concern for many Americans across this country. White identifying, women identifying, and non-binary identifying individuals all cited cost of living as a concern, 25, 24, and 23% respectively. Greater Mankato area residents were slightly less concerned than national survey data, but this still ranks as a top concern for these communities. And ongoing economic uncertainty appears to be affecting women more than men. Significantly more women than men, 31 versus 19%, say they're finding their financial situation difficult. Women's overall financial positivity has also declined significantly from 44% in 2021 to 33% in 2022. Surveys reveal that women's financial health is at a 5-year low nationally, and women are now spending significant time worrying about their finances. 28% of LGBTQ youth reported experiencing homelessness or housing instability. And so we'll see here that for individuals with a disability, LGBTQ+, and veteran identifying respondents, that is their primary concern. Again, the greater Mankato area is certainly a reflection of national data, and there are some slight differences in the GMA region in that individuals here feel slightly more positive than the national average. But as you can see, these communities do still have significant concerns, and these are therefore opportunities for community organizations, for individuals, and for everyone to come together and to try to make the greater Mankato area even more inclusive, accessible, and a more welcoming place for all. As I just noted, housing is a concern for most demographic groups. There are a few exceptions to this, however, that are worth noting. American Indian or Alaska Native identifying individuals who responded to the survey were more concerned with economics, more specifically, the lack of quality jobs in the area. And Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander identifying respondents had a greater concern with transportation, and specifically transportation assistance. Multi-race identifying respondents felt inclusivity was of greater concern than housing, and more specifically, people from diverse communities and identities not feeling included in the community and their social needs not being met. Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, and Latin identifying respondents cited economic concerns, specifically employment assistance and information not being particularly easy to find. Finally, non-binary individuals who responded to the survey also noted that inclusivity was of greater concern than housing, with bias, discrimination, or exclusion being commonplace in the community. That said, you'll see that Black or African American, Asian, white, women, individuals with disability, LGBTQ+, and veteran identifying respondents all agreed that housing was a primary concern. There are some minor differences even among these groups about the specific concerns within this housing research category that we'll dive into in just a moment. As you can see, there are some common concerns. Highlighted in blue, you'll see real estate agent treatment of community members as a recurring concern across multiple demographic categories. White identifying individuals, in particular, highlighted quality and affordable housing as a concern, which is slightly different from some of their other peers from different demographic groups. So it's important to note that even among demographic groups that share concerns in primary research categories, such as economics or housing, transportation, there may be differences specific to the exact concern of their community and what they would prioritize or ask community organizations to prioritize when addressing community concerns or low sentiments. Now that you've heard some of the data, I'm sure that you're wondering, what should we do about this? How can I help? What steps can we take next? Where do we go from here? The report outlines some proposed potential actions to address concerns raised by community members. In fact, a number of community members provided recommendations themselves as part of the survey response process, as they had the opportunity to respond to open-ended questions at the end of the survey, and we read each and every one of those responses. So what you'll find in the recommendations section of this report is recommendations based on DEI best practices, as well as recommendations made by community members or community leaders in direct response to some of their own experiences living in the greater Mankato area. The recommendation section of the report is divided into the 7 main research categories we referenced earlier. Those potential actions that are proposed in this section support the ideal or future state of inclusivity in the greater Mankato area. The potential actions are proposed to support community partners in their future efforts to serve residents, and we still recommend that any organization partner with equity-focused groups to ensure that equity is integrated into any planning and program development processes that may occur as a result of considering this data and next steps. I also want to reiterate that the recommendations do not reflect any particular partner's thoughts, beliefs, or values, and that the report doesn't imply that any one partner or organization is responsible for implementing recommendations or addressing an issue identified by the community in this survey. The potential actions are high level and should be reviewed by relevant community organizations to determine scope, timing, resources, feasibility, and other important factors. And we hope that this report will serve as a resource to them as they do that work. So let's jump into some of those recommendations now. Now that we have had an opportunity to review some of the strengths, some opportunities for improvement, and we've also looked at some of that key demographic information and reviewed how different demographic groups may have responded to survey-related statements, we're going to take some time to review recommendations by each major research category. So for the purposes of today's presentation, we're going to look at the greatest areas for improvement by major research category. Let's take a look at those now. Inclusivity. Only 30% of respondents indicated that instances of bias, discrimination, and exclusion are rare in the community. As a result, we're recommending that the community consider creating safe spaces to discuss the impact of bias and discrimination among community members and encourage self-reflection and growth. In the healthcare space, survey respondents noted that information and resources on substance abuse assistance were not easy to find. So we recommend identifying current communication methods and gaps, modifying practices to ensure resources and substance abuse assistance information is further accessible and easy to find for the community. Regarding economics, wages and salaries in this area do not meet the cost of living, according to survey respondents, with less than 34% agreeing with this statement. Additionally, a large number of respondents identified equitable pay as a concern. Participants in interviews noted that economic justice and livable wages for all community members were among their aspirations for the greater Mankato community. In response to this, we encourage the community to make pay equity resources available to local businesses and identify ways to partner with companies to conduct pay equity assessments. Housing. The community does not currently offer enough quality and affordable housing options, according to survey respondents. Only 30% of respondents believe that they have equitable access to mortgage, insurance, and loan services, and participants expressed hopes for increased access to home ownership as a future state of the community. We recommend that you partner with financiers to increase access and equity in mortgage and loan services in the community. In the transportation space, less than 34% of respondents feel transportation assistance is easy to find. Working with community organizations willing to leverage their networks to disseminate information about assistance information may assist with this particular issue. In the education space, less than 44% of respondents feel that the Greater Mankato area schools meet the needs of all students, regardless of their backgrounds. Participants in interviews and focus groups also suggested education on existing systems and financial literacy might be helpful for individuals identified as quote-unquote new Americans. We recommend partnering with community organizations to develop programs that meet the needs of underrepresented or underserved populations. These programs might, for example, cover financial literacy. And finally, our seventh research category, safety. A majority of respondents indicated that they do not believe people from diverse communities and identities feel safe in this community. We recommend partnering with safety organizations to identify current resources available to residents, disseminating information about these resources, and identifying opportunities to close equity-related gaps in safety programming. There are numerous other recommendations in the findings and recommendations report that we encourage everyone to view. Each of these findings that we have in the report have an associated recommendation for potential action. Again, no one organization, person, or community group is responsible for enacting these recommendations and taking these actions, but we ask you to consider them as you are having discussions and as you're considering your future work that you may do in the community. We appreciate the time that you spent to learn more about the report and about this data. And again, I would encourage you to view the full report and spend some time reading through the findings, reading through the recommendations, and thinking about how you and your organization may be able to leverage the data in this report for the good of the Greater Mankato area. Thank you.